Good morning. The Unitarian Church of Montpelier is located on Western Abenaki land, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples. The Unitarian Church of Montpelier honors, recognizes, and respects these peoples as the traditional and ongoing stewards of the lands and waters on which we gather. In that same spirit, we will respect, protect, and be good stewards of this land for as long as we walk upon it. My name is Vertus LaVar Robinson, ministerial intern for the Unitarian Church of Montpelier, and I use he, him, or they pronouns. And it is a pleasure to welcome you to our service this morning. Thank you for joining us in this time of worship from wherever you are. Whether you're on Zoom, on Facebook, or watching the service on YouTube on your own time, we deeply appreciate your presence and fellowship. The Unitarian Church of Montpelier is a Unitarian Universalist congregation founded in 1864. We are a religious community that welcomes all as we journey together seeking spiritual wholeness and justice in this world that we live in. Whether you are a newcomer, a longtime member, or somewhere in between, you are part of our community, and we are so glad that you are here. If you are joining us on Zoom, the chat function will be on for much of the service. It is a great way to publicly welcome and support one another, to affirm the hard work and effort of our worship team, and to share good vibes and positive thoughts with each other. For technical issues and constructive thoughts, please private message one of our Zoom hosts, indicated with an asterisk by their name, and join us for coffee hour after the service to share them there as well. Thank you to our virtual greeters who are offering hospitality and tech help throughout the service. And additionally, on Zoom, click on the live transcript button wherever it lives on your screen for increased accessibility. And just a brief few announcements about the life of our congregation. There are a few baked goods from the holiday fair still available. Sales closed at 9 p.m. tonight. So place your order with some of the best bakers in town. Also, the holiday fair is offering you a chance to give as well as receive. And there is still a chance to be matched with a neighbor in need of a special holiday gift. Stay for our coffee hour breakout room to learn how you can participate. And there will also be a dedicated breakout room hosted by our climate action team this morning as well. Finally, please read the weekly newsletter to learn more about the many upcoming events in our church community. And now, let us enter more deeply into our time of worship with our prelude written by the lesser known sister of Felix Mendelssohn. Her name was Fanny Mendelssohn Hansel, who did not receive due credit because of her gender. We honor her this morning with this prelude.
Here. Good morning. I am the Reverend Joan Javier Duval. I use she, her pronouns. It is good to be with you in worship today. As we gather for this hour of worship, we gather as people seeking stories of the past that feed our souls and challenge our assumptions. We gather as people whose histories may haunt us or may make us whole. We gather as people whose histories have been victoriously written onto the pages of textbooks, and as people whose histories have been defiantly scratched into the margins. We gather as people who tell and retell our stories, shaped by the past and creating new futures. Let us gather, honoring all of who we are and all that we bring into this community. Let us gather with our hearts set on truth, on compassion, on justice, and on love. Come, let us worship together. And please join in singing our opening hymn, We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle, from wherever you are. And Danya Prince will tell us a little more about it.
We began this month of holding history with two traditional hymns, sung in a style and with lyrics as they might have been heard over 150 years ago. Today, we'll present contemporary renditions inspired by those same two hymns, repurposed to meet their particular historical moments. Following a long folk tradition of writing new words to familiar tunes, We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle, number 212 in Singing the Living Tradition, uses the simple and powerful music of We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder, with new words by Carol Eagleheart. Please join Carolyn's Angel Band now in singing We Are Dancing Sarah's Circle.
We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. We are dancing Sarah's circle. Family, neighbors all. Here we seek and find our history. Here we seek and find our history. Here we seek and find our history. Family, neighbors all. We will all do our own naming. We will all do our own naming. We will all do our own naming. Family, neighbors all. Every round a generation. Every round a generation. Every round a generation. Family, neighbors all. On and on the circles moving. On and on the circles moving. On and on the circles moving. Family, neighbors all.
And we are pleased this morning to have the Groberg family leading us in our chalice lighting, Dan and Mary Margaret, Molly, and new baby Anna.
Let us now light the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. We invite you to light a chalice at home if you have one nearby. We light this flame, an enduring symbol of our collective commitment to lead with truth and compassion. Please join us in saying these words of affirmation, adapted from Universalist Minister L. Griswold Williams. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant.
We are a congregation that cares for and supports one another deeply. The ministry of caring is one that we are all invited into and that so many of you participate in formally and informally. We also benefit as a community to have some of our members trained in and committed to the ministry of caring. The lay pastoral care ministry team is an extension of the minister and shares in the ministry of caring that I lead, supported by our ministerial intern, Vertus LeVar Robinson. The team is trained in the skills of active listening and providing a pastoral presence. They provide support during challenging times and offer what is often the first line of response in crisis, as well as ongoing support. I would like to now introduce our lay pastoral care team for this church year as we take a moment this morning to recognize them and to commission them in their service to the congregation. Our lay pastoral care coordinator is Mary Jane Olson, and joining Mary Jane as caregivers this year are Denise Bailey, Susan Baker, Art Stuckey, and Ruth Whitty. There are many reasons why you might want to talk to a lay pastoral caregiver. Some reasons include major life transitions, like the death of a loved one, divorce, job loss, financial strain, and chronic or terminal illness. Other reasons might be that you would like to have conversations about spirituality, or that you are continuing to struggle with a long-standing circumstance. Or maybe you just want a soul friend, a friend who can listen, ask meaningful questions, and care for your spirit in a unique and gentle way. Lay pastoral caregivers provide a listening, caring space for reflection about your emotional and spiritual journey. Each of these people was chosen or recommended because of their commitment to the congregation and their particular ability to listen and to be present. This is their ministry. As we begin a new church year, we now commission the lay pastoral care ministry team in their role as spiritual leaders and listeners. Wonderful. Art, Denise, Mary Jane, Susan, and Ruth, are you committed to offering and encouraging pastoral care within this congregation? Will you lead by example in your actions and in your words, in your pastoral presence, and in your personal spiritual life? Will you reach out to those in need with open minds and open hearts, seeking always to be a healing presence? If so, please unmute yourself and say, I will.
I will.
I will.
Thank you. And I will give the congregation a chance now to respond. We will give all of you the ability to unmute yourselves so that you can participate verbally. I'll give you a moment to find your unmute button if you'd like to participate now. I ask the congregation, will you place your trust in these caregivers? Will you allow yourself, even challenge yourself, to ask for their care and to receive their care? Will you honor them with the role and responsibilities of lay ministry? If so, please say, we will.
We will.
We will.
Wonderful. Thank you all. There are also others in our congregation who have volunteered to provide practical kinds of help in times of need and crisis, including providing meals, rides to doctor's appointments, pet care, or grocery shopping. Thank you to Erin Aguayo, who coordinates this outreach through our Caring Network. You can email Erin at ucmcaringnetwork@gmail.com to add your name to the list of people willing to be called upon and to request help when it is needed. And you should be seeing the email address in the chat as well. Thank you to those of you who served as caregivers over the years, and to all of you who have shared in both asking for help and offering care and support in many ways. This ministry of caring truly builds our loving community. Thank you all. Our community pouch recipient this month is Just Basics, the parent organization of the Montpelier Food Pantry, and we have an opportunity now to learn more about their work in the community through this short video.
Aww. You might have to wipe away a little tear.
So the food pantry's been operating out of the Trinity Methodist Church for, I think, about 30 years. It started as an ecumenical group in Montpelier, and then about a dozen years. And at the beginning, the food pantry was like one tiny room. It was literally a food pantry, and that it operated. The room was probably 10 by 12, and that was it. That was the whole Montpelier food pantry. And then it, grew over time, and about a dozen years ago, it broke off into Just Basics was formed to run the food pantry. So it kind of moved away from the ecumenical, although we still get a lot of support from the churches. But much bigger. It's evolved from basically canned foods, primarily from USDA canned foods, to much broader selections. A lot of produce. So the need has grown and continues to grow.
A lot of just making sure that people are organized. Some people pick up meat or other things, like if the school has some food, they'll go over, they'll pick up the food from the school and bring it back. We have a bunch of partners that write off food on their taxes, like Shaw's, so we weigh all that stuff that comes in. That's another thing volunteers do. And because we're bringing food out to people and we don't have the ventilation yet for people to be able to come inside, the whole process begins with us loading up coolers full of food. So we clean out the coolers in the morning, we fill them up with perishables, we bring them upstairs, and then we do the opposite at the end of the day. So there's kind of a lot.
So during the last year and a half of COVID operations, we've been completely 100% curbside. The church has been closed to the public since March of 2020. And in the meantime, so we take orders. We have established an online ordering system, which has helped reduce wait times and makes it a lot easier when it's somewhat inclement weather, like as you see today, a little bit chilly. So that has helped a lot, but it requires a lot more volunteers. We need a lot more people to make this work. It requires more resources. We've also started home deliveries during this time, and we're going to keep the online even when we start getting back into normal and moving back.
The food pantry is serving more than 700 people on average per month. We are as busy as ever. Revenue comes from a few grants, but 80% or more of our revenue is from the community and individual donors.
Our generosity is a form of love and gratitude. Our gifts freely given help us to practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation. And each month through our UCM Community Pouch program, we share part of our collection with an important church fund or a community organization aligned with our values. And as you just saw, for the month of November, our community pouch recipient is Just Basics, the parent organization of the Montpelier food pantry. Your contribution to the community pouch this month will directly support Just Basics. You can make a financial contribution today by donating online. You can go to ucmvt.org and click Donate to UCM. There are options to contribute to the general fund, which supports the general operating budget of the church, the community pouch, or both. You can also mail in a check to the church, or you can use our text to give option. Simply send a text message with the word give to 802-266-4848 and follow the instructions sent to you. We are so grateful to each and every one of you for your generosity in its many, many forms. While the offering is given and gratefully received, please enjoy a special musical offering.
Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
I'll give him this. Hamilton's financial system is a work of genius. I couldn't do it if I tried. And I tried.
Who dies, who tells your story?
He took our country from bankruptcy to prosperity. I hate to admit it, but he doesn't get enough credit for all the credit he gave us.
Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
Every other founding father's story gets told.
Every other founding father gets to grow old.
And when you're gone, who remembers your name?
Who keeps your flame? Who tells your story? Who tells your story? Who tells your story?
I put myself back in the narrative. I stop wasting time on tears. I live another 50 years. It's not enough. I interview every soldier who fought by your side.
She tells our story.
I try to make sense of your thousands of pages of writings. You really do write like you're running out of time.
I rely on Angelica. While she's alive, we tell your story. She is buried in Trinity Church near you. When I needed her most, she was right on time. And I'm still not through. I ask myself, what would you do if you had more time? The Lord, in His kindness, He gives me what you always wanted. He gives me more time. I raise funds in D.C. for the Washington Monument. She tells my story. I speak out against slavery. You could have done so much more if you only had time. And when my time is up, have I done enough? Will they tell our story?
Oh, can I show you what I'm proudest of?
The orphanage.
I established the first private orphanage in New York City.
The orphanage.
I helped to raise hundreds of children. I get to see them growing up.
The orphanage.
In their eyes I see you, Alexander. I see you every time. And when my time is up, have I done enough?
Will they tell my story?
Oh, I can't wait to see you again. It's only a matter of time.
Will they tell your story? Who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Will they tell your story? Who dies, who tells your story?
Thank you so much, choir, for putting that together. I invite you as we enter into this time of meditation and prayer to take a breath, to feel yourself arriving more fully into this moment. We set aside time now to share with one another those joys and concerns that we bring with us into this time of worship. You may be celebrating something special in your life that you'd like to share with all of us so that we can celebrate with you. Perhaps you are experiencing a challenge or a loss that you'd like to share so that we can offer our love and support. Art Stuckey, today's lay pastoral caregiver, is available this morning to lend a listening ear of care after the service. His number is available in the Zoom chat and in our directory. And a final candle for all of the joys and sorrows being held in the silence of our hearts this morning.
And please join me in creating an atmosphere of prayer. This has been a complicated week this past week. There have been justice served and injustice served as well. Complicated. This coming week, Thanksgiving week throughout the United States, and it can be a source of joy as well as a source of sorrow, and oftentimes somewhere in between, complicated. So join me in this prayer that was adapted from the words of the Reverend Laurel Gray. In the name of all that is complicated. In the name that all that is complicated, dear Spirit of life and love, God of names, God of no names, may we enter this week gently. May we welcome all guests that come to our table. The ambiguity of why bother this year, the joy of celebration and fresh baked pie. The grief of the empty seat that can never be filled. The warmth of candles lit in the dark. The malaise of all that you have been told about how to feed your body. The hope of reconnection, of feeling filled for the first time in a long time. The fear that, is this safe enough? The loving bustle of ancestry and recipes and traditions. The horror of history and the ways in it lives on. May we welcome all these guests at our table and all others who come needing a place to call home. Where it seems to be no good news and the repeat of history, where it seems like all hope is lost and justice can never be found, there is a place and a space here for all of that. Plenty of grace to share. May justice flow down like waterfalls and peace like an ever-flowing stream. But where there is no justice, let's not let that peace come too soon. In the name of all that is complicated. May it be so. Blessed be Ashe and amen. Now, please join us in a brief time of quiet meditation, after which we will sing together, Spirit of Life.
Our reading this morning is the poem We by Deborah A. Miranda, shared with permission from Split the Rocks, The Quarry, a social justice poetry database. Deborah A. Miranda is an enrolled member of the Ohlone Costanoan Esselen Nation of the Greater Monterey Bay Area in California. Miranda is professor and John Lucian Smith Jr. Endowed Chair of English at Washington and Lee University, where she teaches literature of the margins and creative writing. She says, poetry is not her weapon, but it is her superpower. Here is the poem, We.
The people you cannot treat as people, whose backs bent over your fields, your kitchens, your cattle, your children. We whose hands harvested the food we planted and cultivated for your mouth, your belly.
We whom you beat into plows until we hated the very earth from which we emerged. We whom you buried between the river stones and beneath adobe mud. We whose skeletons, like rebar, held up your mission walls, built on stolen land by stolen hands. We know something about foundations.
We who have risen from the roots of those footings, whose pain you will not acknowledge even when we shout it in the streets. We, the people, tear down monuments to the men whose hands held the whip that beat enslaved Indian or African, whose blood mixed with stones and dirt to make the mortar of your fortunes, whose skin gleams black and brown, copper and tan, whose skin is olive and white like yours.
We know why the foundations rot and crack beneath your children. We whose children have felt those reverberations in the wombs of their mothers. We enter the halls of the academy and the House and the Senate like drops of rain seeping through your roof from a weeping cloud of justice. Listen, we are telling you why this foundation cannot last.
Here we are at Standing Rock, protecting not just our waters, but the water you drink. Facing water cannons in below zero weather, rubber bullets like fists, sound cannons shifting the bones in our ears. Protecting not just our waters, but the waters your grandchildren will drink. Here we are in Flint, Michigan, hauling jugs of contaminated river water from our taps to press conferences and courts of law, demanding, would the children of a wealthier, whiter city be forced to drink this poison?
And here we are telling you your corporate money will not protect you from a corporation with more money. This country's foundations are not built on democracy, not one nation under God, but a multitude of oppressions beneath your feet.
We endure before you, still humming with the power of the sacred, knowing a body drowned in adobe leaves in empty space, knowing how emptiness caves in. We want to live, want to do this work. That is our inheritance.
We exist here in the disaster zone of a nation struggling to emerge. We are midwives. We are doulas. We are grandmothers. We have studied construction and the art of rising from rubble. And here we are, still not burning this country down, still not setting fire to the master's house, though you have not seen even 1/10 of our grief and our anger.
You can never extract our bones from the foundation, but reward the weight they've held with homelands and sovereignty. You may never return home those bodies once stolen, but honor their descendants with the means to earn homes and clean water. You can never untell all the lies or fill in the omissions of this history. So make room for us or move aside. We
know something about foundations. Who tells your story? Whose story do you tell? Yesterday marked the annual Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day to memorialize those murdered due to anti-transgender hatred and prejudice. The day raises public awareness of hate crimes against transgender people and publicly mourns and honors the lives of transgender people who might otherwise be forgotten. The transgender actress Laverne Cox once said, "It is revolutionary for any trans person to choose to be seen and visible in a world that tells us we should not exist." Who tells your story? Whose story do you tell? Later this week, many of us will celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. Recently, there has been more recognition of the full history of that holiday, the full history of European and Native encounter when Europeans began their project of colonization in North America. And there has been greater recognition of the full history of the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag in the area of what is now called Plymouth in the state of Massachusetts. The full history is more nuanced and complex than a narrative of friendly relations and Indian submission. For the United American Indians of New England and many other Native people, the fourth Thursday of November is not a time of celebration, but a commemoration of a national day of mourning, a day to dispel myths and to raise awareness of historical and ongoing struggles of Native American tribes and people. Who tells your story? Whose story do you tell? In 1886, the late Wee Waa Azuni Zamana visited Washington, D.C. from the Zuni Pueblo on what we now call New Mexico and shook the hand of President Grover Cleveland. In the Zuni tribe, Zamana is a recognized third gender outside the traditional male-female binary. The late Wiwa was born biologically male and performed sacred duties traditionally performed by both men and women in the tribe. I will be referring to the late Wiwa with the pronoun they to honor their non-binary gender. They were a skilled potter, weaver, and spiritual leader. They mastered essential Zuni myths, songs, and ceremonies, and became a cultural ambassador for the Zuni. Their visit to Washington, D.C. in 1886 made an impression on many of the elite figures in the Capitol, including President Cleveland and his wife. In sharing aspects of the late Wiwa's story today, I wish to honor their role in history while also acknowledging that my life experience and personal history are quite distinctive from theirs. Even with that limitation, and perhaps because of it, I believe it's valuable to bring the late Wiwa's story forward, to stretch my own imagination and empathy, as well as my understanding of how their life and story has and has not fit into an accepted and mainstream historical narrative. Who tells your story? Whose story do you tell? In the early 1880s, 2 anthropologists were sent to the Zuni Pueblo from the newly formed Bureau of Ethnology to conduct research. Matilda Cox Stevenson and her husband, James, studied the Zuni tribe as well as other native tribes in the Southwest. And it was through this anthropological research that Cox Stevenson and the late Wiwa came to know one another and became friends. The late Wiwa traveled to Washington, D.C. for 6 months with the Stevensons. They had learned English and served as a cultural ambassador, raising awareness of Zuni life and culture, and also assisted in documenting Zuni artifacts and pottery that were brought back to the Smithsonian National Museum. The written historical record of the visit primarily comes to us through news articles and the records of government agencies. No written record exists of the late Wiwa's perspective of the visit, so we're left to imagine what it might have been like for them to travel all those miles and to be among people who were so different and looked upon them with such fascination. Even though the late Wiwa's visit made headlines and the media marveled at the dignified, quote unquote, Indian princess in their midst, the US Office of Indian Affairs continued its policies of assimilation with the Zuni and other Pueblo Indians in the years after the late Wiwa's return. These policies led to the dismantling of tribal culture, including giving up the recognition of Zamana people within the tribe. The late Wiwa transitioned in the year 1896 at the age of 49 due to heart disease, and the Zuni consider their early death a calamity. Who tells your story? Whose story do you tell? Over decades of suppression of Native culture and forced assimilation of Native communities, nonconformist gender identities and expressions were driven underground. In the 1970s and 80s, the Native LGBT community emerged as a more organized force for recovering diverse gender identities and sexual orientation. In 1990, at a gathering in Winnipeg, Canada, of a group of Native men, women, and transgender people from various tribes, the term Two-Spirit was developed as a way to unify various gender identities and expressions within Native communities. Although the term is fairly new historically, Two-Spirit people, like the late Wiwa, have been present in Native communities for many generations. Two-spirit implies the presence of male and female gender identities in a single person and also encompasses gender fluidity and nonconformity. Many great dreamers, shamans, visionaries, or medicine givers were two-spirit people, according to Zachary Pullen, a member of the Chippewa Cree tribe. Pullen says, "For me, the term two-spirit resists a Western definition of who we are and what we should be. Two-spirit are integral to the struggle of undoing impacts of historical trauma, because our roles in tribes historically were part of the traditions taken away from us with Westernization. We aren't attempting necessarily to convince the Native community that we exist historically and presently, but that our history is just as much wrapped up in the story of Indian country as is each other Native Americans. Throughout history, there have been people who again and again have resisted oppression and resisted the suppression of their stories. Against all odds and in the face of grave danger, they have persisted and passed on traditions and wisdom. And this is true of two-spirit people throughout Native tribes and cultures, throughout history and in the present day. Mani Chakabi, an Ojibwe Cree activist and elder, speaks about coming to the recognition of their two-spirit identity. They recount talking with their grandmother, who was the first to identify them as two-spirit. Mani Chakabi shares how their grandmother was worried for them and encouraged them to seek out spiritual support and sustenance. And their grandmother reminded them that, quote, God lives inside you. She or he lives inside you. End quote. History, as it has been written and passed down, can never fully encompass the truth of that sacredness and divine belonging. Beyond the pages of history, there exists the ultimate truth of this human dignity. Through our sharing of stories, we can honor this dignity. Through our sharing of stories that have been buried or forgotten, we can refortify the foundations of what we accept as our history. So let us make room for narratives that bring to light the shining truth of those who have always been in the cracks of human history, a truth that makes us all more whole. So may it be. And I'll invite you now to join in our closing hymn, presented by the New York City Virtual Choir and Orchestra, and arranged, orchestrated, produced, and mixed by Adam and Matt Pod, originally from Vermont. How can I keep from singing?
My life goes on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, no far off hymn that hails a new creation.
No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from
While all the tempest round me roars,
And as we draw our service to a close, we extinguish the chalice and carry within each of us its healing flame, the warmth of community and the spark of hope into the days and the week ahead. Please join me in saying our congregational mission statement. We welcome all as we build a loving community to nurture each person's spiritual journey, serve human need, and protect the earth, our home. In the days ahead, may you cultivate an abundance of gratitude. May you give thanks for histories reclaimed, renewed, and reimagined. May you know the gifts of the earth and the gifts of community.